Arteriosclerosis, huge topic, very important. Let's get into it. I'm going to break down the name first. Arterial means artery. Sclerosis, do you remember? That means stiffening slash thickening. So the stiffening slash thickening of the arteries. Now there's three major types and they have different pathogenesis, so different ways that they come about. First one is atherosclerosis. This is the one we always hear about. This is the most common one, or not most common, most commonly heard about. And this is hardening of the medium and large arteries. Okay. Next is arteriolosclerosis. What the heck is arteriolo? Well, that basically means, that means arterioles. Arterioles equals to arteriolo. So that's thickening of the arterioles. Finally, we have Monckeberg sclerosis. Now this is dystrophic calcification of the media. Do you remember what the layers of the arteries were? Remember we started with the intima. That's the intima. And then remember that the muscle layer around it is called the media. And then remember that last layer is the adventitia. So in Monckeberg, it's this one. And that's going to be important. So the intima is unaffected. So blood flow in here, in the lumen, is totally fine. Blood flow fine. Okay? So that's our little overview. Let's get into it. I'm going to go into atherosclerosis now. So the way this happens is you get a buildup of cholesterol plaques in the medium to large arteries. Leads to thickening and stiffening of the arterial wall. And this blocks blood flow. Now, how does this happen? That's the key question. There's a series of steps that's going to happen. First step one is endothelial cell injury. Endothelial. And what is an endothelial cell? Remember, that is the cell that lines the lumen of. So endothelial cell, okay? When it gets injured, and remember, endothelial cells are like they're the barrier that prevents stuff from getting in. When it gets injured, let's see, draw in. We injure it, you lose that barrier a little bit. Then you can have lipids such as LDL. LDL is going to leak into the intima. LDL goes in. LDL into the intima. And then LDL, we have LDL particles now. And then macrophages will eat the LDL. So macrophages, let's do a little Pac-Man here. Okay, Pac-Man eats it. And when it eats the LDL, it's going to turn into a foam cell. Okay. So now you have foam cells in the intima of your arteries. Grossly, this is seen as a fatty streak. So when you look at it, it's going to be a streak of yellow in the arteries. And this happens to everybody. By the time you're age 20, you're going to have some of this. It can come and go away. It doesn't block anything. It's flat. But the next thing that can happen is you can get inflammation and healing of this fatty streak. Okay? And this is going to trigger smooth muscle proliferation. It's going to trigger smooth muscle proliferation. And there's also going to be extracellular matrix deposition. So if you allow this to progress, what's going to happen is you're going to get an atherosclerotic plaque. It's going to progress like that, and you're going to end up with an atherosclerotic plaque here, blocking up your lumen of your artery. So again, inflammation, healing, causing smooth muscle proliferation and extracellular matrix deposition. Okay. Now let's talk about risk factors. These are very important risk factors because atherosclerosis itself is very important. It's going to be causing many different things. So the risk factors for atherosclerosis is going to be the risk factors for all the other risks, nasty pathologies you can see in the heart. First of all, hypertension. That's a risk factor. High LDL. That's a risk factor. So hypertension is a risk factor because it can damage the endothelium. Higher pressure damage to the endothelium. High LDL. Too much LDL, extra LDL is going to go into and through that damaged endothelium and hang out in the intima. Diabetes can damage the endothelium, okay? And finally, smoking, that can also damage the endothelium. Smoking has all those nasty little chemicals, and then they go into your blood and they can damage your endothelium, cause inflammation. Now, there's a couple of non-modifiable risk factors, including age, genetics, and sex. So, males and postmenopausal females are most at risk for atherosclerosis. Now, atherosclerosis, we said these are arteries. And which arteries? Well, all arteries can be affected, but the most commonly affected ones are going to be the abdominal aorta, then the coronary arteries, then the popliteal arteries, which are behind your knee, and finally your internal carotid arteries in your neck. Okay, you actually want to memorize this. This is kind of a straight rote memorization thing, but memorize it. Abdominal aorta, coronary arteries, popliteal arteries, and then internal carotid arteries. And the other key point is plaques will most commonly form at artery branch points. So let's say we have our artery and it's going to branch into two different things. So say abdominal aorta branches into the internal carotids. This branch point where there's blood flow, this is where the plaques like to form because there's turbulent blood flow at these branch points, okay? And the blood isn't going straight and nice, straight and smooth. It's going to be turning. It's going to hit your endothelial cells. It's going to cause damage there. So that's where you have most damaged endothelial cells, and that's where you can get the LDL molecules going into the intima and causing that atherosclerosis. All right, complications. We talked about a little bit. We said this can cause a lot of complications. So if you have stenosis of medium vessels, again, you're going to impede blood flow, okay? And when you block blood flow, there's less blood going through. So if it's less blood in the heart, that's angina. If there's less blood in the peripheral vessels, such as your legs, there's arteries in your legs, you can get peripheral vascular disease. So there's not enough blood going to your legs. Finally, you can get if there's blockage of the mesenteric arteries, that's arteries to your gut, to your intestines, you can get ischemic bowel disease. Okay, so these are all very relevant and very important. Now, so that's just blockage. Straight up blockage. If you can get also thrombosis, okay? Thrombosis means when you're it basically means that the blood there's a cap around this plaque, okay? That's preventing. There's a lot of prothrombotic factors in this plaque here. There's a cap covering it, but it can break down. You can get a bunch of prothrombotic factors leaking out, and it's going to cause your blood to thrombose or to coagulate. And that's blood. It's going to be completely blocking off that lumen. And when that happens, that's how you get a heart attack. Okay. Again, you have a plaque. It's blocking up a lot, but not everything. And then there's a cap around the plaque that's just keeping everything in place, not keeping it hidden away from the blood. But when you break that cap, you get these prothrombotic factors going into the blood, causing thrombosis, causing problems like heart attack and stroke. Other thing that can happen is you thrombose, you get thrombosis, you get that blood clot. That blood clot can shoot off to other places. It doesn't always have to stick there. It can keep going, shoot off to the brain, it can shoot off to, let's say, your legs, and they can block out, and then finally end up blocking off the blood vessel in another spot, such as the brain, leading to a stroke. And finally, we can have aneurysms. We're going to talk about that later. But atherosclerosis basically leads to weakening of the arterial wall. And we'll explain how that happens later. But oftentimes you can have an aneurysm in the abdominal aorta. Remember that was the most commonly affected location of atherosclerosis. Okay, so this is a very important topic. Make sure you know everything that's going on in this slide. All right, so the next one is arteriolosclerosis. Remember what this was? This was the arterioles. The stiffening of the arterioles. There's two types, hyaline and hyperplastic. So the hyaline type is where you have, it's due to diabetes mellitus, and you have protein that's deposited under the endothelium. Other things that can cause this are hypertension or aging. So I think about like hypertension pushes that proteins in. Aging just happens as you age. And this will lead to thickening of your artery wall. The next one is hyperplastic type. There's very high blood pressure, and the way your blood vessels respond is going to have the smooth muscles are going to thicken. Remember that arteries already have the thicker smooth muscle to deal with all that high pressure in the blood vessels. And if you have even higher blood pressure, your smooth muscles have to work even harder to maintain, to work against that pressure, and they're gonna get buffer. They're gonna proliferate and thicken. And what happens on histology is you see that onion skinning. You see those layers and layers, and that is the hyperplastic type. So same idea with arteriosclerosis as atherosclerosis. This thickening can lead to reduced vessel radius, because this is all happening in the intima under the endothelium. So your radius can be reduced, and you're going to get end organ ischemia for both of these. So that can be a problem too. Finally, our last one was Monckeberg medial calcific sclerosis. So the key word here is the medial. Okay, it's calcification of the media of the arteries. I already talked about this before in the introduction, because the intima is not involved. There is no obstruction of blood flow. That is important. So because there's no obstruction of blood flow, you're not gonna have any symptoms at all. There's not clinically significant. There's not a problem at all clinically. On X-ray, what you may see is this. It's like a pipe stem appearance, is what we call it. It's like wavy, twisty, tortuous blood vessels. All right, so that's it for our arteriosclerosis. Remember, there's 3 types. Arteriosclerosis is just thickening of your vessel walls. 2 types are very, very, very clinically important, because they can lead to ischemia and a lot of other problems. And then your 3rd type, Monckeberg medial sclerosis, we don't really care about, because the blood vessel is not impeded. All right, so that's it for our arteriosclerosis.